we were actually driving to Santa Clara, we actually heard crying voices in the bus. And we're like, oh, and the bus driver had to stop because like, what is happening? Where are the sounds coming from? So it turns out to be that it was actually a mother, like a family that was traveling from Lubango. And because she couldn't pay tickets for the whole family, she stuffed 2 kids under the chairs. So they were actually under the chairs, and that's why they were actually crying because they were uncomfortable. And they asked the lady, where are you going? So she's actually saying, I'm leaving Lubango because there's no rain, and I'm going to try my best to cross the border into Namibia with my family with a hope of finding a better living or livelihood in Namibia, to see what is in Namibia, if we can find a better living condition in Namibia, And that's not the only family that is actually moving from Angola. We're actually seeing a lot of families that are actually moving into Namibia because Southern Angola is actually experiencing one of the worst drought as well. And Southern Angola and Northern Namibia, we have kind of similar climatic conditions. And we are seeing a lot of Angolian families that are actually on the streets right now, especially when it comes to children that are selling crafts, that are actually also begging on the streets. And this is actually the topic that we are going to be speaking today on climate migration. And we are just going to focus on both cross-border migration and internal migration as well. So my presentation, I'm just going to focus on what is climate mobility, the cross-border between Namibia and Angola, and also just looking at the Namibian climatic migration in the country itself, and also some key evidence that we are going to look at, the challenges that those migrants are actually facing, and some of the lessons that we might also learn, especially with what we have already experienced. Okay, so when we speak of climate mobility, what is climate mobility? So I don't know if it's mobility or maybe mobility. Yes. So yes, climate mobility. So when you speak of climate mobility, it's actually a movement of people from, why are you guys laughing? Oh, okay. It's the accent. I'm a Panyama, so yes. Please bear with me. So climate mobility is actually a movement of people. It can be either temporary, it can be permanent from one area to another because of the impacts of climate change or because of climatic stresses, which can be drought, which it can be flooding, which can be resources loss as well. And when we speak of climate mobility, we have what we call displacement, which is forced displacement. When you speak of displacement, it's mostly forced because people are forced to leave an area because it's probably experiencing flood, and then they are taken to another area, probably which is like a temporary shelter, and to be there. And we also have what we call migration, which can be local migration, people moving from one region to another because of climatic stressors, or we can also have cross-border migration, which is not forced. It's mostly voluntarily people moving, and it's also sometimes an adaptation measure as well. People moving because this region probably they're experiencing some, like maybe a flood or a drought, and then they have to move to another, probably going to window with the hope of finding opportunities or living or going to Kara's region and to try to live a better livelihood or looking for opportunities. And we also have what we call also planned relocation as well, which is mostly also done by governments, whereby people are permanently removed from a certain area because it's actually probably being threatened by climatic conditions, which can be flooding, sea level rising, or flooding and stuff like that. And then it's actually planned, people put into a certain area, which is actually planned mostly by the government for them to stay there for permanently. So when it comes to Namibian's climatic reality, I wanted to start with Namibia and because we also like internally also experience, migration as well. People are like, why are the bamboos everywhere? Like, yeah, the bamboos are found in Kara's region, the bamboos are there. One thing about the old regions, we are dependent on agriculture. We are dependent on crop farming and livestock farming. But because of the drought, it has become a challenge because we can't survive anymore and then we have to move to other regions to try to find jobs or to try to find like education and try to kind of like live a better life because we can't focus on the crop and the livestock farming anymore. It's not able to sustain the entire families and stuff like that. And we cannot just sit around like at homes and stuff like that. So you have to kind of like look for better opportunities, even traveling outside the country as well. So that's one thing. So because like we experience in Namibia, we experience flood. We also have episodic floodings as well, whereby you find some areas actually being flooded, which also causes schools to close down. I think one of the Lena was also speaking of their school being closed down because of the flood. And when it's rainy season, some schools are have to close down. The kids cannot go to school anymore. And that's actually one of the issues as well. And also like when there's drought, there's livestock loss. People, especially in the old regions or like when there was severe drought, we lost so many livestock at a point where we even lost people themselves because especially men and our grandparents, their respects come from cattle. So if all your cattle die and then they ended up now being, I don't know if there's a word for that, like you are also affected as a person because your whole life was in those kettles. You find people with 50 kettles and stuff like that, and then they all die because of the drought and stuff like that. And yes, I spoke about school disruptions and also child labor as well. So also one of the issue that because now kids are forced to go look for jobs and for them to make a living because now the schools are closed or the kids have to drop out of school because of these climatic stresses as well. Okay, I just wanted us to look at some key evidence because there's actually a research that was done on on Namibia, specifically on migration in Namibia. And it's very difficult when it comes to when you are doing research in the country because we don't normally have our own researches. We don't normally have our own information. So there was a research that was done by the International Organization of Migration, if I'm not wrong, in 2018. And they actually just also confirmed that Namibia is very vulnerable when it comes to climate change. Because we experience this drought and flood, and is that most of our economy depends on agriculture, which is like agriculture and livestock farming as well. So we are very sensitive, climatic sensitive country, if I must say. So, and also climate related mobilities now includes, like I spoke of, rural to urban areas and cross border movements as adaptation measures. People are not only migration does not only happen between countries or continents, but it can also happen from rural to urban areas. And then the urban areas become now overcrowded, and then there's nobody now in the village or rural areas, and there's nothing actually happening there. So those are some of the issues. And also one of the things was found was the policy gap because we don't have specific migration policies in place yet. We do have policies when it comes to environmental issues and climate, but we don't really have specific issues that speak to migration itself and how that should be dealt with or procedures that are actually placed. So that is actually one thing that is actually recommended for us to advocate for. And then Namibian Angola transboundary context. So Like I spoke earlier, the southern Angola and northern Namibia, when I speak of southern Angola, we are now looking at provinces like Unene, Lubango, provinces such as Namibia province, which are now regions there in Angola, and also now looking at regions in northern Namibia, which is Ohangwena, Oshana, Omusati, and Kavango there. We mostly like experience the same climatic conditions. So when there is drought the other side, there is also high chance that there's also a drought also in the northern region of Namibia as well. So, and then now families are forced to leave Angola and then having them to come to Namibia to find for better hoping to live a better living conditions or to find opportunities here in Namibia as well. And one like the migration corridor, I mostly say corridor, but yes, so the migration corridor is actually like most of the family come from Lubango. They come in Santa Clara, and then from Santa Clara they actually come to Oshikango, and then from Oshikango they actually come in Ondangwa here, and then they go to Oshakati, and they end up now in Windhoek, in Walvis Bay, and that's why we have these kids that are actually by street lights that are selling these crafts that are also there baking. You will see them by the malls and stuff like that. So that's actually like the migrations, like the road that we mostly also take. So, and it's like most of this, it's mostly kids that are actually set down there. You won't really see elders that are out there, like, that are the one that are selling, like, the crafts. Probably you'll see, like, young boys or young girls, but it's mostly children that you'll see. If you are in Windhoek and you are by, like, venue or you go to, like, the shopping centers, B1 there, you will actually see them, even here in Ondangwa. I'm not sure where they are, like, most likely the malls. Yeah? Choppies. Yes, a Choppies as well here in Ondangwa. KFC? KFC, ne? Yeah, so you mostly see them there. They're actually selling craft. And most of these, especially young boys, they are also used as cattle headers as well. And there's also a high chance, or not a high chance, they are the risk of exploitation. And they are also at the risk of trafficking as well. Because one can't really trace that this child was trafficked or this child was taken, because most of these migrants, or because of most of these families, they lack documentation. They don't have documentations. They don't have IDs. I remember last year I visited the Ministry of Home Affairs in Windhoek, and I went to the refugee unit, and I was asking them, so where do we classify where do we put now the children that we are seeing on the street, our Angolan family that is coming? It's like, no, we don't take Angolan anymore as refugees, so we can't put them as refugees as well. And I was transferred to the migration office, and they're like, no, we can't really. It's also a challenge also for the Namibian government, because most of the families, they don't have documentation. And that's also one of the issues or the problem that we also have in Angola as well. And also for the fact that they are also not being, we know they are Angolan, but they don't hold Angolan citizenship, or they don't have documentations. And it's a challenge there, because also not many family also understand, especially in rural areas, understand the importance of having documentations or the importance of going to school. Like, even if they are going to school like that. So it's also a challenge, because like, yeah, we know that they are from Angola, but what shows that they are actually Angolan? And for the fact that I think our government is also not, what is the thing? It's also not acknowledging the people themselves, that these are actually my Angolan citizens, and these are actually what we can do to work together with the Namibian government to see how we can actually solve the issue as well. Yeah, yes. So yes, legal documentation and access to school, which is also making it very difficult for them to get access to basic services within the country as well. When it comes to education, when it comes to health, you have no like you. It makes them difficult for them to also be assisted or for them to also be integrated within the system and within the communities as well. And like I spoke earlier. Okay, can like I said earlier, they're actually also very there's a risk of exploitation, and we are already seeing that within our own regions as well. We are taking the Angolan children, the Angolan people, to go and work in the houses and to go and work in cattle, to head cattle, and they are being paid 600, 500 for a month. And I think one thing that also the Namibian government is doing is like, or at least when you are employing these people, make sure that they have an ID or make sure that they have the green consulate card. And if they don't have, try to get them there. So at least even if the person disappears, if the person commits a crime, because it's easier for one to commit a crime and then the person disappear. Where do you go? Where do you live? Where do you go and look for this person? Because you don't even know the identity of this person and you can't trace these people. So that's also one of the issues that is also being encouraged, that at least make sure they have documentation and also make sure that we are not also exploiting the people. We understand it's cheap labor, but that is also like exploitation as well. And also the trafficking as well. Is also like those kids, they are at a high risk of being like child trafficking because most of these kids, even if you are seeing them, they are mostly it's kids that are walking unaccompanied by parents. They are not accompanied by any elder or something. They are just walking and selling and making and doing stuff. And so they are at the high risk of being trafficked because you can't even like if they are even probably they are even being taken, but who will know? We won't know if they're actually being trafficked or if they're actually being taken because there's actually no systems that actually trace or track them or keep records on that. And also we had between 2023 to this year, we had I think several repatriation and repatriation, like the families were repatriated, like Angolian migrants were actually repatriated back to Angola. But then they just disappeared probably for 1 week or 2 weeks. We saw them back again in the States. Why is that? Because the root cause was actually not, and the root cause was not solved or was not because like these people are leaving Angola because there's drought, there's an issue there, there's food insecurity, there is so many challenges that are happening there. And then they are being taken back, but it's not actually planned or there's nothing that is actually happening there that is actually will make their life easier of how they can actually be integrated back into the community as well. So we saw them coming back because the root cause itself was actually not solved and was actually not identified or was actually not, there was nothing that was done. So that's why we actually even repatriation is also not, it's not an option at this point unless we actually come up with activities or platform to see how can we actually solve the issue to actually stop the people from moving or like to stop the push factor, the thing that is actually pushing people to come back. What can we do to actually solve that issue properly? Maybe we can do skill training, we can come up with programs, or we can actually see how we can actually probably do further training on how these people can actually produce their own fodder, or how can they actually adapt within the climatic or in the drought as well. How can they still do farming, sustainable farming, despite a drought? Maybe doing water harvesting programs or trainings and stuff like that. So yeah. So some of the lessons or some of the lessons that we can actually learn, especially with the few years that they've been experiencing that, is actually like economic hardship when we experience migration as well. There is economic hardship because many of these migrants actually end up in informal labor, which is now street vending, and also hedging kettles as well. And also the families are being separated as well because some are left in Angola, some are come here, and then you leave your family in Angola region, you go to the south or you go to Comas region and stuff like that. So, and it's also contributes also to issue of mental health as well, especially when it comes to our young people and the children as well. And also repatriation without addressing root cause results in a repeated cross-border movement. I think that's something that we have learned now, or something that at least we have identified, that if we are not addressing the root cause, the push factor, then it will just be repeating. It was just a process that will be repeating itself. So we have to address the root cause, and also short-term aids like the shelter, the food it's something that is very important, but it can actually be paired with long-term resilient investment when we are investing in skills development, when we are also developing, because we are also not just focusing on the migrants as well, because these migrants are being hosted in communities. How are we equipping, or how are we also equipping the communities themselves, how they can actually respond to this? How can people actually be what is the word? How can people actually be integrated within communities as well? And how can the communities themselves not see these people as threats or as people that are taking their opportunities and stuff like that, but how can we live together and living in harmony as well? And also stronger community and cross-border coordination is something that is really needed, especially when it comes to cross-border. The governments working together in the end, like the international NGOs and the two governments that are actually involved in stuff like that. And also it's something that is encouraged for us to be able to really, yes. Okay, I'm almost done. To really be able to solve the issue of climate migration. So yes, so Uganda is actually one of the countries that is also known as one of the countries in Africa that takes in a lot of migrants, or that takes in a lot of refugees, asylum seekers from other African countries. And there's actually some of the things that they are also doing that are also kind of also working for them. Cause currently, Uganda has about 1.8 million refugees and asylum seekers within the country because they have an open door policy where they allow other African countries to actually, but obviously following different like the procedures that are in place. And so refugees have not allowing other African countries to come. Yes, to come. But they have the refugees that are actually in the country, they have access to work, land, and education as well. So and they're also being integrated in the national planning as well. And yeah, my time is up. So these are just some of the recommendations. That we did discuss, or that we can actually try to do, which is integrate climate migration into our national policy framework, and also to try to strengthen the national and bilateral cooperation during monitoring, data sharing, and integrated learning as well. And we also try as young people to establish youth-led and climate resilient livelihood projects, so that we do not just depend on aids and stuff like that, but in skill development, and also help to support oriented community livelihood to reduce the push factor, which can be like water harvesting programs or trainings for the production and stuff like that, and also engage in data collection and research advocacy as well, so that when we want to do the presentation on one work on program, there is actually data that can actually go back to a group and see how we can actually better help our communities. So this is actually all from me. So yeah, this is just a 4-step. Okay, it's not here. So this actually, first step, community response model is for us to identify, to actually engage with the communities, the families, and gather their stories with them for this research, and also collaborate with locally and build networks with NGOs and youth and churches, not just allowing the government itself to be the one solving the issue, but how can we as youth organizations, how can we collaborate together, and how can we work with other youth or NGOs and churches and stuff like that to actually try to solve the issue, and also act with dignity to respond with compassion, not pity, and also just to advocate regionally, influence policy for inclusive work. And this is really something that we as young people must really do or focus on, to try to advocate for different policies or policy change and policy integration within our communities as well. So that's all from me. Thank you very much. So this is actually a research proposal that we're actually also working on, which is to document conditions of our Angolian migrant children and drivers of migration. And also the method that we are using is actually surveys and interviews and focus groups, participant observation. And also what we want is to get evidence brief, full report, and also to work on community workshops and advocacy toolkit as well. So if you want to get probably to also jump on the project, we can actually also just come through and then we can work on the project together. So thank you so much.
Well articulated presentation. I could see the passion burning in the matter, quite interesting. I'm not so sure if I have a question, probably, or it's a general comment, remarks I would want to submit. I think this is a subject that is quite critical. And I think maybe my question is not necessarily to Elizabeth, but also to the organizers of the event. It's quite a very serious issue in the street, and the circumstances of child labor issues and so forth, especially in the northern region. I personally take this a bit personal, probably. It pains me as an individual and as an African. Now there is good information that Elizabeth is sharing there. One, I'm asking myself to whom is this message is going. It's okay to create awareness here, and I know this is a lot of youth and young people who are here. Good and well for them to know and to be aware. But this message. I have one question. If the climatic conditions for southern Angola and northern Namibia are quite similar, why is it Angolian moving to Namibia but not the other way around? Is it because maybe there is a perception that Namibia offers a better life, even though they face same climatic conditions, for example, drought?